Hello everyone, my name is Ben Emberley and I'm here to talk to you about the Creation of Hyrule, which is being premiered live on YouTube tomorrow on Monday at 8 PM UK time or 3 PM US Eastern Standard Time. I wanted to do a little talk beforehand to give you all a little bit of background information to the piece before it's premiered. In May 2013, I attended the Symphony of the Goddesses concert in London, and the performance was by the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra and conducted by E. Manoon. The event had quite a huge impact on me, and it really opened my eyes up to how powerful the score of a video game soundtrack can potentially be, and how an orchestral force can really magnify the music that 8, 16 or even 32-bit systems can only hint at. Later on, as technology develops, music seems to be taking a more prominent place in video game history. When an increasing number of series employ orchestral recordings as their soundtracks, that's a sign that things are going in that direction. And the music really does take the listener on an amazing journey through Hyrule with Link, and it was a roller coaster of emotions for me. After attending the concert for the third time in April 2016 at the SSE in London, I decided with complete conviction that I wanted to be involved in such a wonderful and incredible venture. But how was I going to do that? My decision was to write a work of my own. Being a trained composer, orchestrator and conductor taught at Canterbury Christ Church University, I felt that this was the ideal opportunity to put my skills to use, to show the producers and the musicians involved what I could offer them, as well as what I could potentially provide them. The piece in question is a symphonic poem for a full orchestra, and it's entitled The Creation of Hyrule. It's based upon the music and soundtracks of no less than 8 different games in the Legend of Zelda franchise, and was inspired by the music of the Symphony of the Goddesses. And I wanted to make some commentary here in this video to give you an idea of how it was made. First of all, what is a symphonic poem? The concept of a symphonic poem was created in the mid-19th century by the Hungarian composer and pianist Franz Liszt, and it's a piece of orchestral music, usually in a single continuous movement, which illustrates or evokes the content of a poem, a short story, novel, painting, landscape, or other non-musical source. While many symphonic poems may compare in size and scale to symphonic movements or even reach the length of an entire symphony, they're unlike traditional classical symphonic movements in that their music is intended to inspire listeners to imagine or consider scenes, images, specific ideas or moods, not to focus on following traditional patterns of musical form, such as sonata or rondo, etc. In other words, the composition tells a story through the music. Naturally, the focus being the Legend of Zelda, there was plenty of story to work with. The work itself is half composition and half arrangement. It contains original music of my own, as well as numerous themes from several different games. Some were pretty much left as they were in the game, others were slightly altered, or in some cases only the melody or rhythm was used, mostly to be combined with a work of my own to provide some kind of contrapuntal counterpart. I started off by creating and considering a storyline. This would narrow down the number of themes and songs in the many soundtracks at my disposal that I'd be able to use. This would save me from wasting time at the beginning by transcribing only the music that I wanted to use in the piece. I settled on this storyline. In the beginning, there was nothing. and out of the nothingness came the creation, as portrayed in the Ocarina of Time video game title. The sun rises on the first day, and the entirety of Hyrule in all its splendour can be seen. Then into this idyllic world come the Gerudos, headed by their king Ganondorf, who usurps the whole of Hyrule. The hero of the story, Link, hears about Hyrule's plight and sets off on a journey to vanquish Ganondorf. Coming across the Gerudo fortress, he attempts to break in, but his assault is stopped by Ganondorf, who leaves him pretty much helpless. Zelda comes across Link and heals him of his wounds, taking him to the Great Fairy to strengthen him and to turn him into the hero that he was ultimately destined for. Finally, after taking hold of the Master Sword, the Blade of Evil's Bane, he storms Hyrule Castle, encounters Ganondorf again, and after an epic fight, defeats him and uses the Triforce to restore Hyrule to its former glory. Once that storyline had been established, I set to work on which themes and songs I would use. Some melodies I simply had to use, like the main Legend of Zelda theme, Zelda's Lullaby, Ganondorf's theme, etc. And from what I heard at the Symphony of the Goddesses concert, and from my own experience in playing many of the games in this series, I knew some that I wanted to include, and given the limits of the storyline, I was able to. A little trawling of the soundtrack playlists on YouTube offered me several more that I could use. After I'd decided on what I wanted to use, I then set to work transcribing all of the music. Now, what is transcribing? That is the practice of writing down music as you hear it, a little like taking dictations from a lecture, but instead of writing down what someone says, you write down the notes played. Some pieces were relatively straightforward, others took absolutely ages to get right. For this, I would say that you would need to have a good ear and able to attune it to the different sounds played in the orchestra, so as to determine what instruments are playing, when, and what notes. It's a very long, painful process, painstaking procedure, but once that was done, I then had the freedom to develop the transitions and the transcriptions so they could accommodate the orchestral forces that the poem is scored for. In other words, beef them up. So they had more impact. Some did need this, others did not. It was more of a question of feel, whether I thought their place in the story and the score really required it. I initially set out to write a 25 to 30 minute long composition, which I estimated would take about 6 or 7 months to complete. It ended up being 55 minutes, taking just under 15 months. My mistake was that I simply hadn't realised just how much music there was in the Legend of Zelda series. When this was all done, I started to construct the poem proper. In some cases I wrote my own music, and in other cases melodies of the game were included. For example, the very opening of the piece has all the strings playing in octaves, just playing a D, stretching all the way from the bottom of the double basses to the highest harmonics in the violins. And the cellos play the Song of Time, punctuated by some quiet chords in the higher woodwind instruments. By this point, I had pretty much decided on what's going where and what's going to be used, and I wrote in the filler material. Some of the transitions were very simple, others were a little bit more challenging. But I did try to keep the music from the games in their original keys. A couple may have been transposed to semitone up or down, but they all stayed the same, pretty much. I also constructed reorchestrated variants on some of the themes, such as the Great Fairy's Fountain, and in some cases, one of my favourite tricks that I like to do is to interweave the melody from soundtracks into the music, like a tapestry, sometimes 2 or 3 together, or in the case just before Hyrule Castle storming, music is played 5. See if you can recognize them. After this point, I went over the score and put in any phrases, ornamentations or attacks, developing the percussion and overall orchestration to make it coherent and provide the maximum emotional effect on the listener. The piece was constructed in Sibelius 7, and then I had a sample set called Note Performer run through it to give the piece a much more realistic sound. As I said, the piece lasts 55 minutes and contains music from A Legend of Zelda, A Link to the Past, Ocarina of Time, Wind Waker, Twilight Princess, Skyward Sword, Link Between Worlds, and Breath of the Wild. It's also a very deep and sincere wish to offer my most heartfelt thanks to everybody whose talents and actions have inspired and motivated me to create this piece, and for bringing the already magnificent music of The Legend of Zelda to this world in such a way. Without doing what they have done in becoming part of this amazing concert series, I would never have been inspired to make this piece of music. And I owe them so much in the way of thanks, and hope that this work, upon which I've laboured out of love for over a year, can go some way in expressing that thanks. Those people include Jaron Moore. Jaron, you're a legend. Amy Anderson, Kevin Zakreski, Kelly Corcoran, Eric Bushholtz, Wayne Strange, Chris Tilton, Juliana Cesarini, and especially Emma Noon. You guys are my heroes, and what you have done has been instrumental in influencing me to make this piece. All I can say is, I hope you enjoy the video, I hope you enjoy the music, and I can't wait for the premiere on Monday the 7th at 8 PM UK time. Really looking forward to seeing you all then.